Well, you all see Nick's passion on this topic, and I hope not that you were all up early, but for any of you early birds, he's also a TV star now. This morning, he did this topic very proud. He was on CNBC, and he did a little spot there on the future of Africa and what can be done. He did a wonderful job. Although I told him I couldn't help but, you know, as Carol, as in journalism, all roads led to, and how's that U.S. economy at the end of the speech, which he clearly did not answer. So I thought he did a wonderful job. Just wonderful, though. So my pleasure, and for those of you that I haven't met, my day job is I run Global Business Services, the division of IBM for services around consulting and integration, and I've been Nick's partner, along with some of my other colleagues in the room, in hosting these GIOs. Now, I have to tell you, I am fairly humbled by what I've been asked to do in exactly 29 minutes. All right, now not 30, not 28, 29. And I'm humbled because what you saw last night, there is great passion from people on this topic. And I have been in all these GIOs, I have been in other deep dives. By far, bar none, this is the most passionate group. And in fact, I heard people say, you know, this isn't going to be a think tank, this is a do tank. Now, D-O. To be clear, do tank. And I thought, you know, I heard that more than once from people. And so there is great energy around already what's being done. So when Nick said, you know, the criteria and how we pick these topics, I mean, they really have always been around something that was, you know, rife with societal issues, huge economic opportunity that would be there, and at the end of the day, it would require a new approach. Clearly, that's what Africa, as a selection for us, has been all about. Although I also feel I'm being very generalist when I use the one word, Africa, to describe Africa. I mean, it's 54 nations. They are very different. It would be like saying a rainforest, which was sitting on the middle of your dining room table last night. I think every one of us had, you know, to call that just green. I mean, there's many colors. And so it's a very complex and I think place that simple characterizations don't do well, but I'm going to try. So let me start first with, Nick alluded to this. So which Africa are we going to talk about this morning? Up on this slide, all right, see those headlines. Social unrest, poverty, a troubled past. Or this Africa, a participant in a global economy, a destination for international investments that's out there, as well as the hope of a prosperous future. Now, you know from Nick's introduction, I am going to focus everything on, it is this one. Right? And I tell you what, in the GIO, in all of our sessions, it is clear people made the choice. And when people have asked me, so what was the big aha did you take out of this? I said back, I think, you know what it is? It is absolutely that economic development is the right path forward to the right future. And I think that's simply said, that is the most predictable, reliable route forward. So, with that said, I'm going to introduce to you the 8 themes. The 8 themes, you're going to get a book, even though you might, you know, be compelled to take notes, I'm sure. But otherwise, you'll get a book that this will all be summarized in. The 8 themes, and what I consider them, they're elements of a complex code that the nations of Africa that break this code, and I think it's set policies for these things, will actually emerge as the leaders that are out there. So themes, maybe I'd be as bold as to call them imperatives. All right, so let me give you kind of my tagline for each one. And then I picked a few to go a little bit deeper in to represent the thinking of the 30 people here and the many, many others, the 150 that participated. So, first theme, moving up the value chain. Now, what's this about? It is about saying that nations should exploit their own natural resources than have them exploited for them. All right, I'll come back to this. Infrastructure. Now, typically people think of roads and utilities, traditional economy, infrastructure. I'm going to posit that will the internet and the communications infrastructure really be the path to the modern economy for Africa? Those 2 things. Third thing, wireless. Next generation applications will transform Africa in ways unseen. Next generation applications. Fourth, skills development. A belief that Africa will reflect the new reality that a global economy is a talent economy. Okay? And I don't mean just university. All right? Job training and other things we'll talk about. Fifth one, informal economies. And what I mean by that, transforming and transferring shadow economies into more formal economies, then into a global economy, right? And though this is a complex, it's a delicate topic. There are estimates that 40% of the GDP actually emanates out of what are these shadow economies. Okay? Number 6, African women. And by that, women will emerge as a very important entrepreneurial engine for Africa. And is there a chance for that to mirror? I'll talk about what's happened in India. Number 7, finance. Topic of finance. In particular, to enable lending in nations where I think the bank of choice is a mattress. All right? Enable lending. And then last, not least, is the role of NGOs and moving more and more to a role of stimulating growth versus subsidizing, in some cases, what is a status quo. I think there was sort of wide agreement to change traditional models here. So those are the themes of all that work. And that's why I say I think they're more than themes. They're imperatives of what has to change and what is changing. I shouldn't say what has to. It is what is changing. So I picked a few. Let me go deeper, and let me start with moving up the value chain. All right, moving up the value chain. Remember, this is the idea that a nation should exploit its own resources, not have them exploited for it, right? So you don't just extract and export, all right? Don't just. And in fact, in all of our deep dives, there was great agreement that Africa got the motherlode of natural resources. Diamonds, cocoa, cotton, coffee, fuel, or oil, the list goes on that's out there. And as some people say, ROW, rest of world, wants it, all right? Now, if you think about this, diamonds, they're mined out of Botswana, except what happens next? They're cut in India, they're set in Belgium, and then we buy them everywhere else in the world that's out there. Or if you think about, I found this a fascinating statistic. Crude oil, Nigeria, produces, did you realize 10% of the world's crude oil, yet it buys $1 billion of fuel every year. Or a topic, maybe closer to my heart, cocoa, all right? 70%, okay, now don't laugh too hard on that topic, but 70% of the world's cocoa actually comes out of Africa. Yet only 5% of the chocolate market benefits Africa, right? And I think that if you think about this, you do see signs of change happening on this topic. And perhaps one that anybody who walked out and got a coffee this morning would recognize. Rwanda is one of the countries that has been able to produce coffee and sell it for $26 a pound. $26 a pound. Now, how? I think it's a great example of a partnership between private, Nick, you mentioned private, between public, between NGOs, having come out of a time of a conflict-ravaged nation, right, in the 90s, come out of that, rebuilding, and $10 million from USAID, many of you are familiar with the organization USAID, $10 million to both build infrastructure and teach people how to do tasting of coffee, all right, smart agriculture. And you can guess who else was in there to help with expertise and training, who now sells that coffee in 5,000 stores around the world, Starbucks, all right? So it is a great example. I mean, high-end coffee, 5,000 stores, Rwanda, $26 a pound. And it begets, it's a term, I have to tell you, I learned through all of this. It's a term called beneficiation. Beneficiation. Meaning that the local economy should benefit from the exploitation of these different natural resources. Now, think about this. There are some industries, different countries in Africa, that you'd say, wow, this is great. Put in a steel plant, or this would be put in, petroleum. They're highly automated industries. So while they may be great for GDP, may not be great for employment. There are other industries, as you think about investment, that will actually help drive employment, and it will help spread the wealth, right? And so I think the one other big point out of this section on moving up the value chain is the thought about nations thinking of themselves as corporations and saying, what has to be my competitive advantage? What do I want to build here? And then us as private investors thinking about that when we make investments, right? It's not just an investment in a return. It's building a competency in a country. So I think that was critical. So moving up the value chain.